Hi and welcome, it's Jim from Mavstar. I'm going to read out this statement and I want to ask you a question. Is not every part of this statement a lie and a perversion of the truth? Okay, so it's about democracy, and this is what Wikipedia say about it. Democracy is a system of government in which state power is vested in the people of the general population of a state. According to the United Nations, democracy provides an environment that respects human rights and fundamental freedoms, and in which the freely expressed will of people is exercised. You know what? I've never seen such a fabrication of a load of lies in all my time, and I'm sure that you're starting to recognise it right now if you never have done before. The government is not interested in working for the general public. To the contrary, when you have world leaders like Rishi Sunak, who are billionaires, running a government, you have to ask the question, is there a conflict of interest? Is he in that position solely to make more money than what he's already worth right now? You know, we saw also Rishi Sunak not so long ago in the news using offshore accounts to evade paying taxes and having tax reductions. This is no lie, and you can check it up. Is it any coincidence that any member of government comes from very wealthy backgrounds? It's not. And these people are fools to realise that the history would show that when this behaviour becomes rife, it brings about the end of an empire. It always has done. And failing to recognise the mistakes of the past only sets up the mistakes to be created and, performed in the future. So we have a complete ignorance because of the greed and the need to wax themselves even richer than what they are using taxpayers' money. And I want to talk about that. Here in the UK, we have the tax rate set at 20%. But let's get real about how much tax we actually pay. And something the government doesn't like to talk about. Whenever you spend your salary after being taxed, after paying your national insurance, you are then paying 20% VAT on everything that you purchase from that point. So let's get real. It's not 20% tax that the rate is set at, it's actually 40%. It should come as no surprise to you that a country like the United Kingdom can raise revenues on their GDP at the tone of over £2 trillion. And yet, the sad state of the UK is that it is insolvent. And I ask you to look into the word insolvency, because you'll find it is insolvent. It's not bankrupt because the UK has never been brought to a court and face bankruptcy proceedings like the rest of us do if we fall into that situation where we owe our debtors money and we can no longer afford to pay it because of our insolvency. So, what is going on, I ask you? And getting back to democracy, well, we have seen just about every freedom trodden on and every human right stamped on by the United Nations. The United Nations has been the biggest downfall of humanity in the last 50 years, because the levels of corruption have gone well underchecked and government has not utilised the money correctly. But what have they done? They've actually expanded their offices. We're told here in the UK, a country that is not 200 miles wide and not more than 500 miles from top to bottom, that we have got to reach net zero by 2030, 2035. And that we'll need to use more wind turbines and solar power to generate the demand of electricity that we'll need. But the problem is is that you would need more than the size of the territory of Wales, one of the countries that the United Kingdom is made up on, and you would need to use that territory just for wind turbines alone. We're in 2024 and we've got 6 years to meet the demands. I was looking at the national grid today, and I'm sure the figures are already well and truly cooked for how much renewable energy is being generated, but even going by what they say, they're not reaching today 1/3 of the needed electricity or the demand. And we've been at this game for the last 20 years now. So it took 20 years to reach 1/3. What hope do you think we've got in 6 years by meeting the further 2/3 needed, or to meet that demand criteria? You know, the numbers simply just don't add up, and there isn't enough time to do it. So it will be an utter failure. But what's even worse than that is the principles on why we are trying to be green and have these green policies and meet such targets with regards to CO2. And that is the truth about CO2. Because CO2 is a trace gas and has no bearing on climate whatsoever. And they won't even have the debate. They won't even let people talk about CO2 and the real effects of CO2. Because the truth is, if we halve CO2 today, all the vegetation on our planet is snuffed out, and we follow along that line shortly after, which means all of us are dead if we halve the CO2. They are deliberately not looking at the temperature historic records, because they know that even somebody with a small amount of grey matter would work out that we have experienced much warmer times in our history than what we are at present. But CO2 is an amazing way of laundering taxpayers' money out of the system and putting it into the hands of the greedy and the wealthy. The reason why there are so many problems today, which has led to, an economic depression, is because the levels of corruption and the lies that originate from the word democracy. And that's why I'm not going to bother voting, because I do not clearly live in a democracy when my freedoms of speech, thought, to share concise information are censored by a government enforcing legislation on platforms like Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, etc. We do not live in a democracy, and it makes me laugh every time I hear a politician use the word democracy, because there is more enforcement now on freedom of speech and the right to share information on any matter than there ever has been in the entire history of humanity. And it was the sharing of thoughts that allowed us to marvel in the technological advancement which we are at right now. And it has been ripped up, and the documents have been thrown into the air as these big cats and fat greedy politicians laugh their way all the way to the boat dealer or the yacht dealer or the private jet dealer. They talk about us having to cut our emissions, yet they drive and fly around in expensive cars, private jets and private yachts. If you look at the history at the end of the Roman Empire, it was politicians that we have right now that brought about the end of that empire. That feeling of being special to be a Roman dissolved almost overnight and brought the empire crashing down. And it was the same for the Egyptian Empire, same for the British Empire. It's all going to go the same way if the behaviour doesn't change. And I will tell you now, it will start with the burning of literature like we witnessed during the 1930s with the Nazis, and it will end with the death camps, just like it did in Auschwitz, Poland. They have no respect for humans, no respect for human rights, no respect for the word democracy. And that's why I am not going to waste even 2 minutes marking that tick on that ballot box, because it makes no difference. I've been here on this planet 50 years, and in the last 30 years I've seen things just deteriorate. Things are not better. And I want you to cast your thoughts further into the future, because what is being set up now is further governance by these people, further interference in your family life, which you are supposed to be protected against according to those human rights. And I want to tell you that artificial intelligence is already removing the labour force from the labour industry at an alarming rate globally. And we are about to see robots in the factories more so than what we see them now. And not one politician has took it upon himself to say or realise that this is not sustainable. If we want a system that is based on a monetary system, a capital system, then we need to ensure that people have a job in order to exchange their labour for that currency so that they can participate in that system. Now, I just want to add one other thing. There has never been so many people in this world as what there are today. And with an ever decreasing work population, or the ability to obtain work, you're looking at something similar to musical chairs, and it's just a matter of time before you get took out of this game. And there'll be nothing there from your government, your so-called democratic government, to protect you, your family and your loved ones. So the only thing I can say to you now, at this point in time, is sit back and watch what's about to unfold, because it will gather momentum. I guarantee you that. We are starting to see people say no more. And what you need to do is stop accepting this behaviour from these people. Because if you carry on allowing it to happen, what do you think the world will look like for your children and their children in the future? There is a war taking place now with organisations like the United Nations stamping on people, treading their lives, their livelihoods, their businesses into the ground with no respect whatsoever because of their nonsensical policies which they support. And organisations like the WHO, the IMF, the European Union, they're all the same. They're all suckling off the titty of the taxpayer. Their organisations are growing. I mean, it's just ridiculous. If you just have a look how many government organisations are in the United States. Is it 50 or so? You know, with the FBI, the CIA, the DEA, the local police forces. You know, how many of these organisations does a country actually need to regulate things? And these organisations are not getting smaller, which means there is a further demand to pay for these people's jobs. It's getting to the point that if you don't work for one of these government agencies, if you're not a civil servant working for them, then you are nothing in your society, because you don't have the ability to obtain a reasonable salary so that you and your family can be fed. It's not clever what these people have done. To the contrary, it's something you would expect an infant to do at kindergarten with regards to grabbing all the toys off the other children and totally making it disastrous for that day of that class of children because they got no toys to play with and that one kid has. You would think adults and so-called intelligent people would know better than what they know, and especially their actions would be more honourable than what they are right now. But as more people wake up to this, you watch our freedoms disappear by the hour, by the day. It is becoming ridiculous to watch. There is nothing based on science. Just look at Fauci. You've got to stand 6 foot apart from each other because COVID knows that if you're 6 foot apart from each other, it won't spread. You know, you go into a shop and there's this big plastic perspex up there, a barrier. Yet 5 foot away from the ceiling, there's a big gap. COVID can't go over that barrier. You know, wear these masks that have little air holes because they don't fit tightly and sealed to your face so that the air can move through. But no, COVID sees that you've got a mask on and therefore completely, you know, does not infect you. Just look at the policies they brought out with regards to, you know, not just being locked down, told we couldn't leave our houses, imprisoning nations of people based on no science whatsoever. It's ridiculous what they've done. And because people spoke out about it, they was targeted for special treatment. And the most common treatment that they get targeted with is let's take the money off them. You've seen it happen to even the billionaires now. If they don't fall in line, they get their money took off them. That's what we're seeing with Donald Trump. That's what we're seeing with Elon Musk and others that don't sing off the hymn sheet that they've been told to. You heard Elon Musk say when he was talking about Bob at Disney that he tried to blackmail him and he told him to go fuck yourself. And now look at all the trouble he's having. It's because these criminals control the law courts. We've seen how the justice system in New York was weaponised against Donald Trump. All the other former presidents of the United States that committed worse atrocities was never tried like Donald Trump was tried. Not only was he tried, he was found guilty on 34 counts. Can you believe that? And I want to make a prediction. My prediction is that Donald Trump is possibly going to go and face prison sentence. He's going to be incarcerated. Because I can't see any other reason why they would go to such lengths to indict him on 34 cases as they have done and find him guilty. So that judge who's going to make the decision on Donald Trump is very likely going to put him in jail just so they can manipulate this year's elections in November in the United States. I think people don't see the wood through the trees. And as this gets more ridiculous, then we will see more idiocy flowing out of these government departments globally. Because in order to maintain what they got and what they're doing, they have to keep making sure that our freedoms are restricted and that the lies stay in place and the truth just gets swept under the carpet. So I'm telling you now, we do not have any democracy in this world. It's an illusion. Because if you just look at this statement, you can ask yourself the question, does the United Nations concern themselves and respect human rights? Does the United Nations allow people to freely express their opinions? And does platforms like this one, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram and a lot of the others have government enforcements put on them if they do not regulate people that talk about what they should be allowed to freely and openly. Because you will already know the answers to those questions. What you're going to see, guys, unfortunately, is a further reduction in everything in your life. You know, I told you this was going to happen 6 months ago to the observatory. I asked you people to stand by, you know, and support each other so that you could continue having what we specialise here at the observatory doing, that is the magnetic North Pole positioning and relaying critical information regarding our environment and the anomalies that are taking place. But you didn't. Only a few came over to Patreon and are still there now, but the majority didn't, and now they've lost that service until, you know, things change, if ever they do. And if you want to listen to people that have no equipment, no qualifications on the subject, then if it's free and that's what you want, you get what you pay for. You know, it's always been the case. If you pay a little bit more for something you could have brought cheaper, isn't it always that little bit more better? But you get nothing for nothing in this world. And if you won't share the burden of, you know, that something with others, then you're all going to go without. Hopefully I've given you a few things to think about. There is a link down there in the description if you want to help support what we do. Maybe we could change things about whether or not that information comes back to YouTube. It's entirely up to you. The links are there. The ball is in your court. As always, bye for now.